When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling, and for shoppers, buying, simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does online business better than Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/income.
At Strayer University, we help students like you go from, is it possible? To anything is possible by offering access to up to 10 no-cost gen ed courses, so you can reach your goals affordably and fast. Visit strayer.edu to learn more. No-cost gen eds provided by Strayer University affiliate Sophia. Eligibility rules apply. Connect with us for details. Strayer University is certified to operate in Virginia by Chev and has many campuses, including at 2121 15th Street North in Arlington, Virginia.
Hello and welcome back. Here we revisit the stories of lives cut short, cases that once sat forgotten, collecting dust until a breakthrough forced them back into the light. I'm your host, Doug Bailey, and this is In Cold Pursuit. Viewer discretion is advised. Our first case comes to us from a quiet corner in upstate New York, where a teenage girl's body turned up in a cornfield near the Genesee River, but no one knew who she was. For 35 years, she was known only as Caledonia Jane Doe. The morning of November 10th, 1979 dawned cold and wet in Caledonia, New York. A local farmer was surveying his land when he spotted something unusual in a cornfield. At first, he thought it might be a hunter in red, someone trespassing. But as he got closer, he realized it wasn't a person standing. It was a body lying face down in the dirt. She was young, petite, clothed in a red nylon jacket, a plaid shirt, tan corduroy pants. No wallet, no purse. Her pockets were turned inside out. She had been shot once in the back, once in the head. The wound near her eye suggesting she never saw it coming. And then the rain came, washing away much of the evidence. Whatever biological trace the killer left behind was lost to the storm. Investigators named her Caledonia Jane Doe, or just Callie. They estimated her age was somewhere between 13 and 19. The lack of dental work suggested poverty. The tan lines on her body pointed to a warmer place, California, maybe Florida. There were no reports of missing girls in the area. No leads. Nothing but a brutal murder and a teenage girl who didn't seem to belong. Witnesses placed her at a diner in nearby Lima just hours before her death. A waitress remembered seeing her eating dinner with an older white man, wire-rimmed glasses, tan station wagon. He paid the bill. Then they vanished. What happened after that dinner remains a mystery. The autopsy revealed that she'd been shot once at the edge of the cornfield, dragged deeper in, then shot again. The angle of the first shot, over the right eye, suggested she hadn't flinched. She didn't see it coming. She may have even trusted him. The scene was cold and calculated. Her killer hadn't just murdered her, he erased her. No ID, no luggage, no trace. And so, Callie Doe was buried under a borrowed name in a Dansville cemetery. The tombstone simply read, "Unidentified Girl, November 1979. For decades, that was all the world knew of her. But science has a long memory, and in the 2000s, forensic technology was catching up. Investigators exhumed her body in 2005 to collect DNA. Then, in 2006, they tried something new, palynology, the study of pollen. Her clothes were sent to a lab in Texas, and the results were astonishing. The pollen on her jacket told a story. Australian pine, found only in a few parts of the US. Southern Florida, parts of Texas, a few campuses in Arizona, and 3 areas in California. Other grains came from birch and spruce, trees more common in the mountains of the western United States. None of those trees existed near the cornfield where her body was found. The conclusion? She'd traveled thousands of miles in the weeks before her death, from Southern California or Arizona through the Sierra Nevada, possibly even Nevada, then across the country, ending in Caledonia, New York. A long, winding road with a terrible destination. Welcome back to In Cold Pursuit. Fast forward to 2014. A woman named Laurel Noel had been trying to find her friend, a missing person, for years. She began reaching out online, trying anyone and everyone's luck to find a lead. Eventually, she did find someone, Pamela Dyson, who was her friend's half-sister. They shared stories, realized no one had seen or heard from that person since the late 70s. They contacted the Hernando County Sheriff's Office in Florida and were told something shocking. There had never been a missing persons report filed. They filed one immediately, and that single act changed everything. Carl Koppelman, the forensic artist who had drawn the reconstruction of Callie Doe in 2010, saw the new report. He compared his sketch to old photos of their friend. The match was uncanny. He contacted the Livingston County Sheriff's Office. Soon after, Pamela Dyson submitted a mitochondrial DNA sample. On January 26, 2015, officials confirmed it. Callie Doe was Tammy Jo Alexander. Tammy Jo Alexander was born on November 2, 1963 in Atlanta, Georgia. By the time she was a teenager, she was living in Brooksville, Florida, a town with moss-draped oaks and wide-open skies. But the sunshine couldn't cover the cracks that were forming at home. According to her half-sister Pamela, Tammy's childhood was unstable. Their mother, Barbara Jenkins, struggled with addiction and mental illness. Jenkins cycled through prescription medications, volatile moods, and even suicidal ideation. Tammy's biological father wasn't around, ever. Tammy was raised mostly by Barbara and a stepfather, neither of whom were equipped for the emotional demands of a child in distress. Pamela, who had a different father, left the house when she was around 11 to live with her grandmother. Tammy wasn't so lucky. She stayed, and she suffered. By the time she reached high school, Tammy had a reputation for running away, sometimes for a night, sometimes for weeks. One of her closest friends, Laurel Noel, recalled a time the two of them hitchhiked together all the way to California. Just kids, barely teenagers, getting rides from truckers, sleeping wherever they could. When they finally got to the coast, Noel called her parents, who paid for both girls to fly home. Tammy's mother was furious, but the truth was plain to everyone who knew her. Tammy didn't run away because she was reckless. She ran away because she was desperate. And eventually, one of those escapes became permanent. Her family assumed she had started over somewhere new. Pamela even hoped it. She imagined Tammy had found peace, maybe even built a family of her own. In 1998, when their mother passed away, the obituary listed Tammy Jo Alexander as deceased. Not because they knew for sure, but because by then everyone assumed she must be. They had no idea she had already died in a field far from home. Even more haunting, on what would have been her 57th birthday, investigators released a snippet of Tammy's voice from a video cassette she had sent to her boyfriend in 1979. In it, she jokes, laughs, sounds so alive. For a moment, the girl in the cornfield becomes real again.
Hi, Kevin. How you doing? I'm fine. That was nice to hear from you. I'm very glad to get your letter. I gotta go now, so you take care and be careful.
A sister, a friend, a teenager with a future, stolen. Tammy's family decided to leave her buried in New York, where she'd been laid to rest all those years ago by strangers who cared enough to name her. A new headstone was placed over her grave. It reads, Tammy Jo Alexander, November 2, 1963, November 9, 1979. Her killer was never identified, but now, at least, she is. Today, investigators continue to test DNA found on Tammy's clothing, searching for a familial match in national databases. And as science advances, so does hope. Because the story of Tammy Jo Alexander proves something we say often here on In Cold Pursuit. Even the coldest case can burn hot in the sunlight. Our second case takes us to Cedar Rapids, Iowa, but stays in a familiar year, 1979. An all-American teenager disappears from a suburban shopping mall just days before Christmas. The case would sit unsolved for nearly 40 years. This is the story of Michelle Martinko. Michelle Marie Martinko wasn't just another student at Kennedy High School. She was the kind of teenager who stood out without even trying. She was bright, photogenic, and performed in choir and drama club. In an era before social media, Michelle's presence was enough to draw attention in the real world. And in high school, attention isn't always kind. She didn't run with a big crowd, didn't seem to have a circle of best friends. Some classmates would later speculate that other girls kept their distance, not because of anything Michelle had done, but because she was too pretty, too stylish, too confident. It's a cruel irony of adolescence. When you shine a little too brightly, people either want to bask in your light or diminish it. Michelle wasn't blind to the whispers, but she didn't let them define her. She had dreams, interior design school, a career, a grown-up life built on her terms. That night, December 19th, was supposed to be routine. She went to a banquet at the Sheraton Inn, wearing a chic black dress and a brown and white rabbit fur coat. The plan was to celebrate, stop at the mall to pick up her new winter coat, then head home. She headed out in the family Buick for the evening. She asked a few friends if they wanted to tag along. No one did, so she went by herself. It was the last decision she ever made. When Michelle didn't come home that night, her parents knew something was wrong. She wasn't the kind of teen to stay out late without calling. By 2 a.m., her father had called the police, and by 4 a.m., they found her. Or rather, what was left of her. The Buick was parked in a quiet corner of the Westdale Mall parking lot. At first glance, it looked empty. But inside, slumped across the passenger seat, was Michelle. She had been stabbed 29 times. There were wounds across her face, chest, and neck, defensive cuts on her hands. The attack was savage, but cruelly focused. She hadn't been robbed. Her cash was untouched. There was no evidence of sexual assault. And the crime scene told police one thing clearly. This wasn't random. This wasn't an opportunistic predator. This was personal. Whoever did this wasn't trying to get away with a purse or a car. They wanted her gone. But here's where things get more frustrating. In that era, mall parking lots didn't have surveillance. There were no cameras, no security guards on patrol. And though Westdale Mall had only recently opened, it was already drawing crowds. Hundreds of people had walked past Michelle that night. Maybe someone saw something. Maybe they didn't realize it at the time. They knew something was certain. The killer had walked away and into the night, and they couldn't let that stand. Police did everything they could with the tools they had. They interviewed over 200 people in the first week alone. They polygraphed suspects, consulted psychics, released a composite sketch based on 2 witnesses under hypnosis. They described a white man in his late teens or early 20s, around 6 feet tall and weighing 165 to 175 pounds, with brown eyes and curly brown hair. They even brought in experts to analyze the scene, looking for any sign of forced entry or evidence left behind, but there was nothing. The only possible trace of the killer was a small spot of blood on Michelle's dress. At the time, forensic science couldn't do much with that. About 5 months after Michelle's murder, a new detail surfaced, one that stirred quiet controversy. A woman came forward explaining that in the early hours of December 20th, she'd driven past the Westdale Mall. She'd glanced into the parking lot, checking to see if her daughter's car was there. Her daughter worked at the mall and had a habit of car trouble. As she scanned the lot, she noticed 2 vehicles. One of them, she later realized, matched the Martinko's family Buick. And next to it, she saw a man standing by the open driver's side door. At the time, she didn't think much of it. News reports had suggested Michelle had been killed between 10 p.m. and midnight. This was closer to 2 a.m. She didn't go to the police. Instead, she mentioned what she saw to the daughter of the city's public safety commissioner, assuming it would have been passed along if it mattered. It wasn't. Police wouldn't hear that information until months later, when they issued a renewed call for tips. By then, the moment had passed, and a potential eyewitness account had slipped through the cracks. Detectives briefly considered filing charges against the commissioner for failing to report the lead, but ultimately no legal action was taken. Another opportunity lost to silence. We'll be right back. And so the years passed. Michelle's parents filed a lawsuit against the mall, claiming its lack of security made the murder possible. The case made it all the way to the Iowa Supreme Court and failed. They were denied legal justice, denied answers, denied peace. Albert Martinko died in 1995, his wife Janet in 1998. They went to their graves not knowing who had taken their daughter from them. By the early 2000s, the case had long since faded from the headlines, but not from the minds of investigators. In 2006, a cold case detective re-examined the file and found that bloodstain again. With new advances in DNA testing, the lab was able to extract a partial profile. It was uploaded to CODIS, the National Criminal Database. No hits. Still, the DNA was strong. Statistically, it matched fewer than 1 in 100 billion people. So detectives started testing people manually. More than 125 individuals were swabbed. Over 80 named suspects from the last 30 years. One by one, they were cleared. The DNA belonged to someone who had never been caught before, never fingerprinted, never arrested. And that made the case nearly impossible to solve, until technology caught up. In 2017, Cedar Rapids PD took a bold step. They hired a company that specialized in DNA phenotyping. From a single sample, they built a digital face of the killer. Skin tone, eye color, hair. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the image they created looked nothing like the original sketch. It showed a blonde-haired, blue-eyed man. When they released the image, they got over 100 tips. One woman gasped, saying the face looked just like a classmate of theirs from high school, but he had already been swabbed and cleared. Then came the next step. The company uploaded the DNA into GED Match, a public genealogy website that allows people to find long-lost relatives. The match came back. A woman related to the killer, a second cousin once removed. From there, a family tree was built, branch by branch, couple by couple, until the circle narrowed to 3 brothers from Manchester, Iowa. Investigators watched them, waiting for an opportunity to arise. Then, in late October 2018, they were there when one sipped a soda and threw away the straw. They tested it. Match. The blood on Michelle's dress belonged to Jerry Lynn Burns. When police confronted him, Burns was emotionless, cold, even when they told him they had his DNA at the scene. He didn't deny it. He just repeated, "Test the DNA." He couldn't offer any defense. He said he didn't know Michelle. He claimed he wasn't there. But the blood said otherwise. At trial, prosecutors showed the odds, less than 1 in 100 billion, and Burns had no explanation. His defense tried to claim the DNA was contaminated, that it had transferred. They brought in a consultant, but even he admitted there was no clear way Burns' blood could have ended up inside that car unless he had been there. The jury agreed. After 3 hours of deliberation, Jerry Lynn Burns was found guilty of first-degree murder. On October 7th, 2020, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Michelle's case was finally closed. Justice didn't come quickly for Michelle Martinko. It took 40 years, 3 generations of detectives, a single drop of blood, and a public DNA database. But in the end, the killer was found. Not by a tip, not by a confession, but by science, and the refusal to stop asking questions. Michelle was smart, funny, driven. She had dreams. And while her story ends in heartbreak, it's also a reminder. The past never stays buried, and justice doesn't expire. Thank you for joining us for this episode of In Cold Pursuit, a Disturbed true horror production from Killer Podcasts. I'm your host, Doug Bailey. Our producer and writer is Noah Fouts, audio engineering by Nathan Corson, executive producer Noah Fouts. For more cold cases, chilling stories, behind-the-scenes content, and early access, support us at patreon.com/disturbedpodcast. Until next time, friends. Stay safe out there.